رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Inshallah, today we'll go over Bab al-Sama', the chapter on hearing. And that's in the Tazkiyah session. And then in Fiqh, we will go over the chapter on Bab al-Ghusli min al-Janaba, or the chapter on major ablution, ghusl, for major sexual ritual impurity, Janaba. Inshallah, we'll begin with the Tazkiyah. And Imam al-Harawi rahimahullah said in Bab al-Sama' قال الله عز وجل ولو علم الله فيهم خيرا لأسمعهم. Chapter on hearing, Allah Almighty said, had Allah known any good in them, He would have made them hear. He would have caused them to hear, or He would have made them hear. This is in Surah al-Anfal. وَلَوْ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا لَأَسْمَعَهُمْ وَلَوْ أَسْمَعَهُمْ لَتَوَلَّوْا وَهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. Had Allah known any good in them, He would have made them hear, He would have caused them to hear. لَأَسْمَعَهُمْ وَلَوْ أَسْمَعَهُمْ, and had He caused them to hear, لَتَوَلَّوْا وَهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ, they would have walked away in defiance. They would have walked away in defiance. Now this is, this particular ayah is pretty interesting, because Allah says, had Allah known good in them, Allah would have caused them to hear, لَأَسْمَعَهُمْ. And then Allah says, and Allah, if Allah caused them to hear, had Allah caused them to hear or made them hear, لَتَوَلَّوْا وَهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ, they would have still walked away in defiance. So what does Allah mean by asma'ahum? Because you listen to this and you say, وَلَوْ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا لَأَسْمَعَهُمْ, had Allah known any good in them, He would have made them hear, and that's it. Once Allah causes them to hear, they will be able to believe, or they will accept faith. But this ayah points out the three different types of sama', of hearing. And keep in mind that hearing here does not only mean hearing voices, but reading is also hearing. It is basically receiving the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or words in general, receiving knowledge in general. So some of us hear the voices, and that is the first type of hearing. And that hearing, the hearing of calls and cries, the hearing of voices, the hearing of utterances, is hearing. So Allah, it's one of the blessings of Allah to enable you to hear. And then, but a lot of people hear that type of hearing. The second type of hearing is Sama'ul Ifham. So Sama'ul Aswat, the hearing of voices, is the first type of hearing. Second type of hearing is Sama'ul Fahm, or Sama'ul Ifham, or Isma'ul Ifham. To make you to hear, meaning to make you to comprehend, to make you to understand. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to when He says, وَلَوْ أَسْمَعَهُمْ, had He made them hear, لَتَوَلَّوْا وَهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ, they would have still walked away in defiance. Had He made them comprehend, they would have still walked away in defiance. Which tells you that there is a third type of hearing that is even higher than sama' al-fahm, or the hearing of understanding, or the hearing of comprehension. What is this? That is sama'ul hidayati wa tawfiq. That is the hearing of guidance and tawfiq. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows you to hear, in the sense that He guides you and He gives you tawfiq. That is tawfiq basically to acceptance. that is when the receptive hearts receive the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Receptive hearts receive the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first type of hearing is hearing of voices. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the hearing of voices. وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah says, وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا كَمَثَلِ الَّذِي يَنْعِقُ بِمَا لَا يَسْمَعُ إِلَّا دُعَاءً وَنِدَاءً صُمٌّ بُكْمٌ عُمْيٌ فَهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. And the likeness of those who disbelieve is like someone who shouts at one, which means here cattle, who hear not but calls and cries, who hear not but calls and cries. إِلَّا دُعَاءً وَنِدَاءً صُمٌّ deaf, بُكْمٌ dumb, عُمْيٌ blind, فَهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ they will never understand, or they will never comprehend. So that's the hearing of voices. The hearing of someone who does not even want to understand what's being said, to reflect on what is being said. But does everyone who understands move on to acceptance? And does everyone who was caused to comprehend or made to comprehend will be given guidance and tawfiq? Not necessarily. You could understand, you could comprehend, you could even realize the strength in the message, the beauty of the message, and then walk away in defiance. Didn't Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira do just that? When they asked him about the Quran, والله إن له لحلاوة وإن عليه لطلاوة وإن أعلاه لمثمر وإن أسفله لمغدق وإنه لا يعلو ولا يعلى عليه وإنه لا يحتم ما تحته وليس هذا من كلام البشر. All of this, long speech about the Quran, it has beauty, إن له لحلاوة, it has sweetness, it's covered with beauty, it surpasses anything, it surpasses any competition, it's never surpassed, it crushes the competition, and it is not of the speech of human beings. So he was made to comprehend, he was made to understand, but he did not accept the deen. And he did not accept the message. So there are three different layers of sama' and isma'. Sama' is when you hear, hearing. Isma' is when Allah causes you to hear, when Allah makes you hear, or when you are made to hear. So the three types of sama' is sama' al-aswat, the hearing of voices, sama' al-fahm, wal-idrak, the hearing of understanding and comprehension, and the sama' al-hidayah wal-tawfiq, the hearing that will earn you guidance and tawfiq. So that's why the Shaykh started with this particular verse. وَلَوْ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا لَأَسْمَعَهُمْ وَلَوْ أَسْمَعَهُمْ لَتَوَلَّوْا وَهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. In Surah Al-Anfal, had Allah known any good in them, He would have made them hear. And وَلَوْ أَسْمَعَهُمْ, had He made them hear, they would have still walked away in defiance. And it's something important that we should, there is like another lesson to learn from this ayah, which is وَلَوْ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا لَأَسْمَعَهُمْ. Had Allah known any good in them, He would have made them hear. Should we reflect on this? Absolutely. Because it, to basically approach the Quran and the Sunnah, seeking to understand them, is not dependent on your raw intelligence. So you may be given understanding, but will you be given guidance and tawfiq? And will you be given understanding to begin with? Any understanding and comprehension to begin with? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Allah needs to know, Allah should know goodness in you. وَلَوْ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا. Goodness in you. So, before you do, if you really want to be guided, and if you really want to be given a good understanding of the Deen and the Quran and the Sunnah, how many people claim to have to follow the Quran and the Sunnah. And how many people learn the Quran and the Sunnah? How many scholars are out there, and how many good researchers and students of knowledge? And they disagree over all matters, and some of their disagreements are acute and severe disagreements. So being guided is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So giving charity, taking care of orphans, walking with your brother to procure some of their brothers to procure some of their needs, doing this work, supporting the weak and unprivileged, and helping out people, and doing all of this work, and certainly worship. To have Allah should have a share of your day and night. And you should have some time for dhikr, and some time for qiyam, and some time for qira'ah, and some time for reflection, and some time for prayers. And all of that is important for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant you understanding, good understanding of the deen. It's not just intellectual exercise. Then the Sheikh says, نُكْتَةُ السَّمَاعِ حَقِيقَةُ الْإِنْتِبَاهِ. The heart of this matter, which is sama', is the realization of full attention. If you get yourself to becoming fully attentive, attention to the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, حَقِيقَةُ الْإِنْتِبَاهِ. That's the realization of the essence of attention, being fully attentive. وهو على 3 درجات أو على 3 درجات. It's probably a typo. It should be 3 درجات. وهو على 3 درجات, and it is of 3 levels. سماع العامة. Well, you know how Sheikh always divides everything into سماع العامة and خاصة and خاصة الخاصة. The hearing of the public, the hearing of the select few, al-khassa. Some people may translate this as elite. Some people, it is the select few, khassa, and the special ones. And khassa al-khassa are the special of the special, the most special ones. So he talks now about sama' al-amma, the hearing of the public, and it has 3 parts: responding to the threats with keenness, or the deterrent threats with keenness. إجابة سماع العامة 3 أشياء. إجابة زجر الوعيد رغبة. إجابة زجر الوعيد رغبة. Responding to the deterrent threats with keenness. So when you hear the threats of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you respond to them, why do they say respond to the deterrent threats with keenness? Because the deterrent threats will certainly deter you. But when you are deterred from, wrongdoing, and when you are deterred from laxity by the threats, you should always have this keenness to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that you are not just afraid of the punishment, you are still, while being afraid of the punishment, while being deterred by the threats, you have this raghba, you have this longing, you have this keenness on pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he's pointing out the importance of receiving the threats not only with fear, but also with keenness and longing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, وَإِجَابَةُ دَعْوَةِ الْوَعْدِ جُهْدًا. وَإِجَابَةُ دَعْوَةِ الْوَعْدِ جُهْدًا. Responding to the enticing invitation. Da'wah means invitation. Wa'd, promise. The invitation of the promise, or the invitation of promise. Juhdan, juhd means effort. It means with resolve. That you respond to the invitation with resolve. We respond, a lot of us respond to the invitation, the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the inviting promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to al-Jannah, to His pleasure, but not with juhd, not with resolve. And he's saying that in order for you to have to benefit from your sama', from your hearing, from your learning, from your reading, you really need to have that resolve when you respond to the promising invitations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, وَبُلُوغُ مُشَاهَدَةِ الْمِنَّةِ اسْتِبْصَارًا, which means the insightful beholding of the favors. So every time you hear, you're allowed to hear. You're allowed to hear the voice. You're allowed to understand the speech. And most importantly, you are given guidance and tawfiq. Every time you have the sama', you have this minna of Allah, you need to be thankful for this minna. You need to be insightful of Allah's minna, Allah's favor on you in making you hear. So it's not your work. It is not your intelligence that you were able to understand or comprehend, or that you even responded and complied, whereas some other people did not comply. They did not understand, and some did not comply after they understood. If you were able to hear, respond in compliance, that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed you and favored you, so you should be thankful, you should be insightful of His favors and thankful and grateful. And then he moves on to sama' al-khassa, which is the hearing of the select few. And he says, وَسَمَاعَ الْخَاصَّةِ ثَلَاثَةُ أَشْيَاء. The hearing of the select few is three parts. شُهُودُ الْمَقْصُودِ فِي كُلِّ رَمْزٍ. The beholding of the intended, which is God in all symbols. So in all of your sama', you're looking for God. It is, you're always looking for God, the central theme of your life. Someone created you, someone brought you here. You're always looking for your maker, you're always looking for your creator, you're always looking for the one to whom you will return. You will return to your maker. After this period on whatever period you have on this earth, on this planet, you are bound to return to your maker, to your creator. Should you not be always looking for God? And this is what he says here, شهود المقصود في كل رمز, the beholding of the intended. Intended is al-maqsood. Allah is al-maqsood. God is al-maqsood. في كل رمز, in all symbols, in all speech, in all hints, in all inferences, in all implications, you're looking for God. And you can't imagine how people who are looking for God, this is the central, this is the highest objective, central theme of their lives and highest objective of their lives. They can witness God, the work of God, in everything they hear. In everything they hear. And it's just like automatically being, interpreted in a way that brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everything, even when you hear people, boastful people talk about themselves, it's amazing how sometimes some people may look humble because they are just socially smart. I did tell you this before. But they're not really humble at all. They're just socially smart. They know how to talk. They know how to look humble. They know how to act humble. They know how to be perceived as humble. And some people don't even have that tawfiq to be socially smart. So they keep on talking about themselves. Like they talk about, you meet them for the first time, and the first 5 minutes, you've learned everything about them. All of their accomplishments in life, whatever their accomplishments in their career, with their kids, everything in the first 5 minutes. And you feel bad for them. But then you feel bad for yourself. Because if you are able to, if these intelligent people are not able to realize their flaws, are not able to realize that this is dumb, that this is not appropriate, is then you should worry about yourself. Whoever told you that you're not making flaws, that you're not seeing? They're not seeing their flaws. Had they seen them, had they looked in the mirror, had they reflected, had they heard themselves well, and figured out that they are actually hurting their image. I mean, if I meet you for the first time and I get to know about most of your accomplishments in the first 10 minutes, you're hurting your image. They are able to see this despite their smartness or despite their intelligence. And are they smart like you? They may be more smarter than you. So you should say to yourself, I should not feel bad for them only. I should be feeling bad for myself because I may also be doing the same thing. Or I may have other flaws that I am unaware of. Or I may be just socially smart, capable of holding, but I may be just as proud as them, or just as boastful as them, or just as arrogant as them. Whenever you're just if your life is about pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is your goal, He is the intended, al-maqsood, then you will be always looking for ways to improve your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, come closer to Allah through everything you hear. Then he says, وَالْوُقُوفُ عَلَى الْغَايَةِ فِي كُلِّ حَيٍّ وَالْوُقُوفُ عَلَى الْغَايَةِ فِي كُلِّ حَيٍّ, the beholding of the purpose of all living existences. It is basically, he is talking to you now about sama' beyond just the sama' of the ears. It is sama' in general, like I told you. It includes reading as well, and it includes just, processing of data. Any processing of data, any data that comes to you, any input of data is being processed in your mind in a certain way that will bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and lead you to Allah. Al-wuquf ala al-ghaya fi kulli hayy, the beholding of the purpose of all living existences. It's just like, you don't take anything for granted. You look at insects, and you look at reptiles, and you look at anything, and you reflect on the purpose of all living existences, and the purpose of life, and the purpose of our existence to begin with. That is a form of sama'. You're hearing Allah's signs in the universe. Because Allah has His signs, Allah has His signs in His book and signs in the universe. في الآيات والمخلوقات, in the verses of the book and in His creations. So this is a different type of sama'. You're hearing the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're seeing the actions of Allah in His creations. And then he says, the third part of sama' al-khassa, or the hearing of the select few, he says, وَالْخَلَاصُ مِنَ التَّلَذُّذ بِالتَّفَرُّقِ وَالْخَلَاص مِنَ التَّلَذُّذ بِالتَّفَرُّقِ, riddance from enjoying dispersion. Riddance from enjoying dispersion. Dispersion is tafarruq. Tafarruq is when you're not together. Your togetherness is basically your togetherness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Togetherness of your goal, your objective, your destination, your journey. It is the oneness of all of this. It's one journey, it's one destination. It is one who is besought, and one whose pleasure is intended. Tafarruq in sama' comes from many different directions. It could even come from this dispersion can come from the vastness of your knowledge. It could basically cause you dispersion, could cause you this sort of to have fractured thoughts, because you're listening to the Quran, for instance, and you are looking for grammatical excellence. You're looking for, basically lessons to learn, grammatical lessons to learn, rhetorical lessons to learn. You're learning the tafsir of this and tafsir of that, tafsir bil-ra'i, tafsir bil-athar, tafsir, rational tafsir, and textual tafsir. You're learning the tafsir of Sheikh so-and-so, and the tafsir of Sheikh so-and-so, and tafsir of Imam so-and-so. And all of this could sometimes take you away from the actual purpose of reading the Quran. So you become distraught, you become dispersed, you become basically, your thoughts become fractured. You're looking for more knowledge, more insight, more knowledge, more insight, but you're not reaping the benefits of the basic message, which is clear and very obvious and very simple. You have learned so much about the verse, but your learning diluted your realization of the simple message in the verse, or the simple lesson in the verse. Compromised your realization of the verse, hurt your realization of the verse, because you are now after the learning, not after the benefit. Is that clear, or it's clear, right? Okay. So, al-khalas min al-talazzuz bit-tafarruq, the riddance from enjoying the dispersion, which is basically you're seeking, by learning this verse, the bottom line. What does Allah want of me? What is Allah's message to me? That does not mean learning is bad. Learning will improve your understanding, will heighten your awareness, will increase your insight. But as long as learning is not obstructing you from seeking the bottom line, what does Allah want of me, and acting upon it. Just like when Umar radiallahu anhu was concerned with the meaning of وَفَاكِهَةً وَأَبَّا, and he did not know what Abba means, he said to himself, وَنُهِينَ عَنِ التَّكَلُّفِ. He said, stop being hyper-technical. We were forbidden from hyper-technicality. It doesn't matter. I understand what Allah wants of me. I understand the meaning, the message in this verse. If I don't know the exact meaning of Abba, it does not hurt my understanding of the verse or the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, وَسَمَاعُ خَاصَّةِ الْخَاصَّةِ, the hearing of the topmost, the most special. And then he started by saying, وَسَمَاعٌ يَغْسِلُ الْعِلَلَ عَنِ الْكَشْفِ, a hearing that eliminates all the faults or the flaws of disclosure. Al-Kashf it is a common Sufi term that is often used in Sufi writings, which is the disclosure. Some of this has wrong connotations, but when a good sheikh, when a righteous sheikh, Sharia-abiding, Sharia-compliant sheikh speaks, then you should understand their speech in the best possible, most Sharia-compliant way. And even if they commit a mistake, that should be forgiven if overall they have the commitment to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah, the revelation to Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he says here, a hearing that eliminates all the flaws of disclosure. The flaws of disclosure could be with the disclosure or after the disclosure. Kashf is basically your disclosure, and it was when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discloses to you some of the meanings, some of the subtleties of the book, the Kitab and Sunnah, and gives you a greater understanding, a deeper understanding. These are the lata'if that the ulama extract from the Quran and Sunnah. These are the subtleties, the beautiful subtleties that the scholars, well grounded in knowledge, discover in the Quran and the Sunnah. And then they tell you that this is considered kashf, the disclosure. Allah discloses to them something that He did not disclose to other people. And all of us read the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of us read the Quran. Do we all have the same understanding in the book of Allah? No, not necessarily. So I was just hearing a scholar talking about the surah, the repetition of the story of Musa alayhi salam, and he was talking about basically the story of Musa alayhi salam is the best demonstration of all of the cornerstones of tyranny. And so you have the Fir'aun as the ruler, the tyrannical ruler who says ana rabbukum al-a'la, and you have Haman as the wazir or the aide. This is the bitana. These are the supporters, because he alone will not be able to basically subdue the masses. So he does need the support system. So you have Haman as his wazir or his prime minister, chief aide, that is basically agreeing with him on his tyranny. And you have Qarun, who symbolizes what? Wealth. The business community, or the businessmen, or the people who control the resources in the country, also supporting him. And you have al-Hashirun, who are, in our times, the media, people who, spin the truth sometimes. Not all the media, but certainly certain media outlets, or sometimes the media outlets spin the truth or spread falsehood. But if they don't spread falsehood, they could spin the truth, and that is also a form of falsehood. So al-Hashirun. And you have the Sahara, which represent the clergy. So you have the clergy, you have the media, you have the business community, you have the supporters, the cabinet, the system, the establishment, Haman, and you have the tyrannical ruler on top. So, could you say that this is a disclosure? It is a disclosure, it is like some form. It is when you are given a good understanding of the deen, or a good understanding of the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he was reflecting on the reason why this surah has been repeated. Could this be the only reason? No, absolutely not. That is when you transgress. If you say that this is why, that is when you transgress. Because some other scholar could be given some insight into, some other reason why the surah was, but if you provide this explanation, is it in conflict with the clear understanding of the story of Musa? No, it's not in conflict. Is it in conflict with the Arabic language? It's not in conflict. Is it in conflict with the tafsir of the earlier scholars? It is not in conflict. It is basically, a beautiful understanding that is not in conflict with anything, and it is in harmony with the tafsir of the earlier scholars, not in conflict. So Now eliminating the flaw. So that is when we talk about kashf, we talk about disclosure. So how do you eliminate the flaws of disclosure? The flaws of disclosure come from many different angles. First, when we talk about sama', the best form of sama' is sama' min Allah, billah, lillah, and the best of all, anillah. So sama' min Allah, to hear from Allah, isn't it the best? Is there any speech better than the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the speech of Allah? Yeah, so that's the best. So sama' min Allah. Sama' billah, you're hearing by Allah. That is why whenever you start recitation, you say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim at the beginning of the surah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, by the name of Allah, the most beneficent, most merciful. By or in the name of Allah. Why are you saying this? You're saying that I rely on Allah to be able to, I rely on Allah to guide me, to help me recite, to help me understand, and to help me reap the benefit from what I recite or what I understand. So you're dependent on Allah. You're hearing by Allah, not by your own intelligence, not by your own intellect, and not by your own zawq, taste, wajd, feelings. Not by, so thinkers, philosophers, they hear by their intellect. Sufis, or sometimes called mystics, although we don't like the word mystics. But they hear sometimes, and not all, but they hear by their zawq and their wajd, their taste and their feelings, their hal, their station. It affects, all of that affects their hearing, and some people hear by their tab'a. They're not philosophers, they're not mystics, they just hear by their tab'a, their nature, their natural inclination. So you're hearing by your tab'a. You tend to be soft, you tend to be rough, you tend to be this, you tend to be hasty, you tend to be deliberate. So you're hearing by your tab'a. You're not really hearing by Allah. You're hearing by your intellect, by your taste, by your feelings, by your natural inclination, and all of this is wrong. When you hear from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you want to hear by Allah. You want to rely on Allah completely to be given the proper understanding, not through the filters of your tab'a. Although you may not be able to completely overcome those interferences, but you do want, you are looking to overcome them. You're looking to become as tough as Abu Bakr and Hurub al-Ridda, for instance, and as soft as Umar in his, looking after the weak and the orphans and the widows and all. Umar, the weepy Umar, whose natural inclination is unlike this. But his hearing was complete. His hearing was impartial. He was hearing by Allah, not through his natural inclination. And Abu Bakr was not the tough, extremely assertive person. He was always the one who was inclined to softness, one who was inclined to forgiveness and so on. But look at Abu Bakr and Hurub al-Ridda. That means he was hearing from Allah by Allah, not through his natural inclination, but he was just trying to be as impartial as possible. So the flaws of disclosure could be about this. So you should make the wahi, the book of Allah and the sunnah of His Prophet, your chief guide. Basically the parameter through which you judge your own disclosures. So whenever you have an understanding of a verse that you feel that it is beautiful, you feel that it is almost unprecedented, then even if you're a mujtahid, even if you're an imam mujtahid, you should be very careful and make sure that there is no conflict between this and the book of Allah and the sunnah of his Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then ilal al-kashf, also the disclosures. If you are giving that disclosure by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you should always be thankful, grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it should not cause you any arrogance. So these are the flaws that come after the disclosure. So there are flaws before, with, and after the disclosure. You're hearing the very impartial hearing that is clear of all those flaws that come before, with, and after the disclosure. So we said you are hearing from Allah, you're hearing by Allah, you're hearing for Allah, lillah, for Allah. The intent of your hearing is the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you're hearing from Him, you're hearing by Him, you are hearing for Him, intending the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And best of all, after all of this, is that you're hearing about Him, about His names and attributes, His actions, His decrees, His commands and prohibitions. All of this is about Him. And that is the best type of sama'. Hearing from Him, by Him, for Him, about Him. That is the best type of sama'. And then there are many other types of sama' that we may not be able to go over because of the time. But we will shortly go over some of them, inshallah, at the end. Then he says, the Sheikh says, وَيَصِلُ الْأَبَدَ بِالْأَزَلِ. So a hearing that eliminates all the faults of disclosure, سَمَاعَ يَغْسِلُ الْعِلَلِ عَنِ الْكَشْفِ وَيَصِلُ الْأَبَدَ بِالْأَزَلِ وَيَرُدُّ النِّهَايَاتِ إِلَى الْأَوَّلِ. وَيَصِلُ الْأَبَدَ بِالْأَزَلِ. Joins al-abad, eternity without end, eternity without end, to al-azal, eternity without beginning, and returns the endings to the beginning. Basically, to connect between the abad and al-azal. Al-abad is not a traceable point because there is no point, there is no beginning. But al-abad as a concept, not as a traceable point. You're not giving a traceable point to you, right? Because a traceable point means like an accident. In our accident, that's in our Aristotelian logic. Accident meaning something that is not essential to the essence, which is al-arad. In ilm al-kalam, it's called al-arad. Or it's called hadith, which is a newly emerged event. But we're talking here about al-abad in the sense of the concept of al-abad, which is the eternity without end, and al-azal is eternity without beginning. So connecting the two is by beholding the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is al-awwal bila ibtida, al-akhir bila intida, wal-awwal wal-akhir wal-zahir wal-batin. He is the first and the last, the first without beginning, the last without end. So beholding the attributes of Allah and knowing that whatever happens in al-abad is known by Him from al-azal. Whatever happens in al-abad is known by Him from al-azal. It is decreed by Him from al-azal. And whatever was decreed in al-azal will come to pass in al-abad. Will always beyond our comprehension, yes, beyond our comprehension. Because we are temporal creations, the concept of abad and azal for temporal creations is beyond their comprehension. Because we're temporal creations, we have a beginning. It's beyond our comprehension. But for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, time is His own creation. Time is His own creation. He's not bound in time. He is beyond time. He is beyond time. So all those points to him are completely equal. There is no difference in his knowledge between the future and the past because he's timeless. Certainly he engages his temporal creations also in a timed way. That is the Athari belief in this regard, that he does engage his temporal creations in a timed manner, but he is, in essence, beyond time, not bound by time. So this brings us to the end of this, and certainly Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah in Madaarij As-Saalikeen talks a lot about the different types of sama', and he talks about the best of sama' and the worst of sama'. And if the best of sama' is hearing from Allah, by Allah, for Allah, about Allah, then the worst type of sama' is to hear from the shaitan about kufr, and put at the other end of the spectrum. But somewhere on this spectrum, the issue of sama' or the sama' of aghani and ma'azif, and Ibn Qayyim talks in length about this. And I'm not going to talk about rulings here because this is not about fiqh, this is about tazkiyah. I'm not talking about rulings. But I would suggest for people who have a soft spot in their heart for singing and for songs and for music and for things of that nature, I would tell you that there is no scholar in the history of Islam that would approve of singing accompanied by music that has negative sort of consequences, that stimulates lust, that talks about the awrat or the nakedness, and talks about lust and lustful desires and lustful acts and things of that nature, and sin and disobedience. And there are even songs that talk about defiance of God and denial of God and all of these things. So there is no room to listen to those songs. You just have to stop, and the stopping here should be cold turkey. You should just stop. And then for the other types of songs, and I'm not going to talk about the rulings of ma'azif. It is my belief that the ma'azif are forbidden except for the percussion instruments, and it is also the position in the four madhahib, the prevalent position in the four madhahib, or the dominant position in the four madhahib. But this is not my purpose of this discussion here. If you have this inside you, then I would recommend for you to try weaning yourself gradually to the point where the Quran becomes a lot more enjoyable. And if the Quran is more enjoyable and it is more beneficial, then it is more enjoyable, more beneficial. Then who's going to reach out to or who's going to reach for something other than the Quran and some inshad to rejuvenate, some inshad which is, shi'r, poetry of good meanings that is being recited with melodious voice. That is inshad. It is poetry that has good meanings being recited with a melodious voice, accompanied or unaccompanied by percussion instruments. That is the inshad that is permissible, and it is permissible to rejuvenate the spirit and for recreation and rejuvenation and so on. But is it anywhere close to the benefit and enjoyment that you could get from listening to the Quran also being recited with a beautiful voice or by someone who has a beautiful voice? Absolutely not. Then gradually, over time, get yourself to enjoy listening to the Quran. It may take a little bit of mujahada in the beginning to wean yourself off from your other forms of listening. It may take a little bit of mujahada, but at the end, it will just be very enjoyable and very beneficial at the same time. You're going to be listening to the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, enjoying the recitation and benefiting from the speech. And every once in a while, listening to some inshad would still be fine for rejuvenation and recreation. The final point that I wanted to say about sama', and I thought that sama' would not take this long, but the final point that I wanted to say about sama' is this: it is the importance of impartiality when you listen. Listen. You know, we get indoctrinated very quickly because we are very suggestible, very impressionable. You like a sheikh, you listen to the sheikh, that's it. You take everything from the sheikh, and I am not saying that you should not like a sheikh and you should not listen. I'm just saying that you should also be discerning. You should know that the ma'soom is one, the infallible is one. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, everyone, as Imam Malik said, will have some of his speech taken from him and some rejected, except the dweller of this grave. And he pointed to the qabr of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So after the Ma'soom departed, then everyone is subject to discerning, basically critique. And it is important. We as Muslims in general, as a Muslim community, we should also, we like Stephen Runciman's account of the Crusades, don't we? We all like Stephen Runciman's account of the Crusades. Because Stephen Runciman, despite the fact that he was, European Christian, he was impartial enough and he was open-minded enough to listen to our account of the Crusades. He did not relate the Crusades only from the Orientalists' account, but from the Orientals' account. He consulted sources in Arabic, in Persian, in Turkish, in Armenian, in Georgian, in Greek, in Latin, certainly in English. He was an educated person, open-minded person. That's why his account of the Crusades was considered to be sort of the gold standard because of his open-mindedness and because of his impartiality. We should hold ourselves to the same standard. Should we not hold ourselves to the same standard? If we like people that are impartial and fair, let's hold ourselves to the same standards. And let's also listen with impartiality, because that will enable you. Listening is extremely important. You could not refute an argument without giving justice to the argument. If you refute an argument with a knee-jerk reflex, you may think that you refuted it. It is in your own mind that you refuted it. But you did not really actually refute it in other people's minds, because you have not given justice to the argument. You have not listened enough to the argument. Sama' means impartial listening for the benefit, for the wisdom, basically to capture the wisdom wherever it comes from and whenever it comes to you. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.